A hand gently ruffles a young man's messy black hair. The young man adjusts the collar of his tunic, looking relaxed and ready. He offers a gentle, confident smile as he prepares for the day ahead. Turning his head, he steps forward into the morning light. Pumping his fist with determination, he cheers to himself that everything is all right. Standing tall, he declares that from this day forward, he will be working as an official court blacksmith. Striding through the open doorway, he vows to work tirelessly to achieve his ultimate dream of becoming the world's greatest blacksmith. He wipes his brow with a bright, enthusiastic grin, taking in the fresh air. A magnificent, sprawling palace stands before him, framed by a flurry of falling sakura petals. He gazes in absolute wonder at the grand architecture of his new workplace. Marveling at the scenery, he notices the vibrant sakura trees bursting into full bloom. Closing his eyes to feel the breeze, he feels as though the courtyard itself is welcoming him with open arms to his new life. His peaceful moment is suddenly interrupted as he catches sight of a girl with long, flowing hair standing nearby. A stunningly beautiful girl in an elegant dress playfully catches the falling petals, leaving him completely captivated and blushing. Startled from his daze, he panics slightly when the girl approaches and politely asks if he belongs to the forging section. He stands frozen for a second, completely mesmerized by her incredibly beautiful voice. Stammering out a quick confirmation, he wonders inwardly if this graceful girl is actually a high-ranking noble. She covers her mouth to giggle softly at his flustered reaction before asking how he knew she was a noble. Clarifying her earlier question, she gently points out that his official forging qualification is visibly peeking out of his pocket. He frantically pats his side, realizing in a panic that his precious document is slipping out. Snatching the credential just in time, he sighs in relief, knowing he cannot forge anything without it. She observes that he looks incredibly young to be a court blacksmith, prompting him to awkwardly thank her for the warning. Standing at attention, he nervously stammers that today is his very first day on the job. Jolting with sudden nervous energy, he loudly blurts out an introduction, declaring his name to be fake. He forces a strained, overly eager smile, sweating profusely under the pressure of talking to her. Waving his hands in a frantic panic, he desperately tries to explain that he was just practicing his introduction, while she merely giggles at his clumsy charm. Smiling warmly and placing a hand gracefully over her heart, she introduces herself as Alicia Bernest. Intimidated by her elegant name, he immediately bows respectfully and stammers out a question about her noble status. She confirms her nobility but kindly insists he drop the stiff formalities and just treat her normally. Still incredibly nervous, he looks down with a bright blush dusting his cheeks. Alicia simply smiles back with a warm, disarming sweetness that instantly puts him at ease. The two stand quietly together beneath the sprawling branches of the blooming cherry blossom trees. Breaking the peaceful silence, Fake politely asks what a high-ranking noble is doing wandering around the courtyard. With a weary sigh, Alicia confesses that she sneaked out to escape the exhausting nobles crowding her room before the upcoming ball. Tilting her head curiously, she softly asks if she can ask him a few personal questions. She stares intently into his eyes and asks if he has a grand ambition or something he truly wants to become. Admitting her own lack of direction, she explains that she struggles with finding a purpose and wants to hear about his. Struck by her earnest vulnerability, his expression shifts from nervous to deeply thoughtful as he considers her question. Clenching his fist over his heart, he beams with absolute certainty and declares his dream to become the greatest blacksmith in the entire world. Alicia's eyes widen in sheer shock, completely taken aback by the massive scale of his ambition. Undeterred by her surprise, he eagerly admits it will be difficult but vows to give it absolutely everything he has. His eyes sparkle with an unwavering, fiery determination that leaves no room for doubt. Captivated by his raw passion, Alicia stares up at him with a slight blush and wide, admiring eyes. A soft, genuine smile breaks across her face as she earnestly encourages him to do his very best. Standing beneath the falling petals, she sweetens her encouragement by wishing him ultimate success on his grand journey. Filled with newfound energy, Fake flashes a brilliant smile and promises her that he absolutely will. Inwardly, he is completely blown away that a high-ranking noble would support his wild dreams so openly and genuinely. He respectfully dips his head, remembering how others have always mocked him for having such an impossible goal. As she departs, a stray thought floats through his mind, acknowledging just how incredibly cute she was. Humming happily down the grand hallway, he wonders optimistically if working at the court means he will get to meet even more cute nobles. Gazing into the distance, he wonders if he might even get married someday. He stands nervously before a massive set of double doors. Taking a deep breath, he realizes he has finally reached the forging section. He places a steadying hand on his chest and exhales deeply. Preparing his greetings, he pumps himself up for the day. Pushing the heavy door open, he reminds himself that first impressions are crucial. Stepping inside, he bursts through with a bright and enthusiastic good morning. Before he can even register what is happening, a massive fist brutally strikes his face. The sheer force of the sudden blow sends him reeling backward with blood flying from his mouth. A fierce, bearded man glares down at him and roars for him to come on. Grabbing the stunned young man by the collar, the aggressive blacksmith pulls him close. Thrown roughly to the floor, Fate gasps in shock as the bearded man barks at him to get to work. He is immediately ordered to maintain the swords and forbidden from leaving until the grueling task is finished. Sitting on the hard stone floor, he realizes his dream of a glamorous court life is completely shattered. With that brutal introduction, his absolute days of living hell officially begin. Time passes mercilessly over the grand, unfeeling architecture of the royal palace. He stands silently, his body bearing the hidden scars of relentless, exhausting labor. Shadowed eyes reveal the deep, soul-crushing toll his new reality has taken on him. His bruised and battered hand weakly grips the doorframe as he struggles to keep moving. 3 grueling years pass since he first began working as a court blacksmith. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, he enters the workshop wearing a worn blacksmith's apron. As a court blacksmith, his primary responsibility is the endless, repetitive maintenance of the royal weapons. He remembers arriving with high hopes after his talent in the countryside was recognized, expecting a dream job. His grand illusions are shattered as Forge Master Morgan furiously screams at him to finish his work. The cruel master berates his competence and spitefully docks his monthly salary for a minor mistake. Trembling under the verbal assault, he swallows his pride and obediently accepts the unjust punishment. He stares dreadfully at a massive pile of weapons that should be maintained by the entire section, all forced onto him alone. He realizes bitterly that this massive workload is direct retaliation for daring to argue with the master. The sneering Forge Master falsely claims the abusive workload is merely education for his incompetence. Submitting completely, he apologizes, having grown numb to the pain and abuse over 3 agonizing years. Breaking his own spirit, he convinces himself that he truly has not reached the level to be accepted by the division. Taking another brutal punch to the face, he hopelessly rationalizes that this is why he gets paid less. Falling backward from the savage strike, he laments the fact that he is never allowed a single day off. Crashing hard against the stone floor, he tragically accepts the blame for all the abuse. Lying completely defeated on the ground, his shattered self-esteem labels him as totally incompetent. Leaving him on the floor, Morgan orders him to skip the holidays and finish the massive pile of maintenance. The corrupt smiths walk away, excitedly planning to properly greet Lady Alicia from the neighboring country at the upcoming royal ball. He remains motionless on the floor, his eyes hollow and devoid of all the hope he once carried. Dragging himself up, he wearily opens the heavy door to his lonely, isolated workshop. He steps into the gloomy, echoing chamber that has become his solitary prison for 3 years. Inside lies a heavy crate overflowing with the countless dull blades he is expected to repair alone. Staring at the daunting task, he realizes he will have to pull another exhausting all-nighter just to finish. Wiping down a blade, he sadly notes that he must sacrifice his scheduled days off to meet the night's deadline. Trapped in a cycle of self-blame, he curses his perceived failure, knowing next week will bring the exact same torment. He lifts the heavy steel sword, narrowing his tired eyes to inspect the edge in the dim light. Summoning glowing holographic runic arrays, he begins his second job as a smith by deploying magical enchantments. The glowing magical script wraps around the blade, permanently increasing its sharpness and preventing all future rust. Since these magical effects wear off after a single week, massive piles of weapons are brought to him endlessly. He explains the simple process of opening a magical window to carefully inspect the inscribed runic information. Focusing his energy, he expertly manipulates the glowing magical script hovering in the air to complete the enchantment process. A magical window displays that enchanting can be performed by adding or modifying the glowing runic characters. Since the magical effects wear out with reckless or prolonged use, constant maintenance is required to keep the blades sharp. As long as the enchantment remains, it can be repaired, but a completely faded spell must be rebuilt from scratch. He stares exhaustedly at the massive rack of swords that still need to be processed. Sweat pours down his face as he pushes himself beyond his physical limits. Gasping heavily for air, he struggles to keep up with the overwhelming pile of blades. His eyes droop as sheer exhaustion threatens to overtake his battered body. Approaching the glowing sword on the anvil, he suddenly feels a strange, comforting presence. Drifting off, he happily notes that whatever he is leaning against feels incredibly soft, warm, and smells wonderfully sweet. Jolting awake with a start, he panics as he tries to figure out what he had just been sleeping on. He leaps back in sheer terror as he realizes he had been using Lady Alicia's lap as a pillow. Rubbing her head playfully, Alicia complains that he bumped her, leaving him completely horrified by his accidental disrespect. Frantically waving his hands, he bows repeatedly and screams out a desperate flurry of apologies. Paralyzed by fear, he assumes he is going to be executed for disrespecting the visiting Duchess. He recalls the other Smiths mentioning that she would be attending the royal ball before coming to the workshop. Slumping to the floor, he is utterly overwhelmed by the chaotic turn of events. Looking down at his dirty apron, he shrinks in absolute shame at his unbathed and shabby appearance. Tilting her head with genuine concern, Alicia gently warns him that sleeping on the cold floor will make him sick. Ignoring his messy state, he forces a strained smile and awkwardly reassures her that he is perfectly fine. He deduces that she must have sneaked away from the ball to wait for him in the workshop overnight. Pointing to the nasty bruise on his cheek, she worries over his injury while he desperately tries to change the subject. Flinching slightly, he forcefully insists that the large blue mark is absolutely nothing. Reaching out, she gently touches the tender bruise he received from Morgan's brutal punch. He winces in pain, secretly terrified that his pathetic weakness is being exposed. Alicia stares at him with deep sympathy, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. He silently curses his luck, deeply ashamed that she now knows he is being bullied by the other blacksmiths. Clenching his fist, he admits to himself that he has fallen completely in love with her. He knows painfully well that her high noble status makes any romance between them utterly impossible. Despite the vast gap in their stations, he still desperately wants to look like a strong, dependable man in her eyes. Apologizing for his lack of hospitality, he insists he must return to work while she wishes she had a healing potion for his face. Smiling softly, she politely asks if she can observe his enchanting process. Blushing deeply under her gaze, he stammers out a nervous confirmation. He places his hands carefully over the blade, preparing to manipulate the magical script. Glowing runes spring to life as he focuses his energy into the steel. Inspecting the floating magical text, she astutely points out that a specific rune is missing. She watches closely as the unstable letters on the sword begin to fade away. With a quick correction, the magical script stabilizes and flashes with a brilliant light. Amazed by his skill, Alicia praises his incredibly beautiful and meticulous maintenance work. Looking around at the massive army, she asks in awe if he enchanted every single weapon in the room by himself. He bashfully confirms it, admitting he has to do it all because he is the lowest-ranking smith. Staring at the blade, he declares that mastering this grueling work is the only way to achieve his ultimate dream. She showers him with genuine admiration, expressing sheer amazement at his incredible dedication. Overwhelmed by the compliment, he humbly denies that his hard work is anything special. As he tries to insist he is still inexperienced, she steps closer and gently interrupts him. Looking deeply into his eyes, she sincerely tells him that his ability to handle such a massive burden alone makes him truly amazing. He tightly closes his eyes, trying to fight back the overwhelming emotion welling up inside him. For years, he had been convinced by his abusers that he was nothing but a useless failure. Desperately clenching his fists, he tries to maintain his composure and act like a strong man in front of her. Alicia gasps in surprise, asking what is wrong as she notices his changing expression. Unable to hold back the flood of relief and gratitude, warm tears stream down his face as his true worth is finally acknowledged. Fake wipes away tears, his voice trembling as he struggles to compose himself. Alicia gazes at him with deep concern, pleading for him to just tell her the truth. She leans in closer, her voice soft yet firm as she begs him to share his burden. Fake turns away, his face flushing a deep red as his emotions begin to overflow. Alicia refuses to let go of his arm, vowing to stay right by his side until he talks. She pulls him into a sudden, warm embrace that catches him completely off guard. He frantically claims he's just using water magic to clean his eyes, desperate to hide his pain. Alicia's eyes search his own, her voice stern as she demands that he tell her everything. Slumping his shoulders, Fake looks down at the floor with a hollow, defeated expression. He finally breaks his silence and begins to recount the long years of abuse he endured. Once the floodgates open, the words pour out of him in a desperate, unstoppable stream. He wonders if it's truly okay to spill his secrets to someone as high-ranking as a duke's daughter. bowing his head in shame, he blames his own lack of talent for the way the others treat him. Alicia stares at him in absolute disbelief, calling the entire situation completely absurd. She reaches out with a look of pure regret, apologizing for not noticing his suffering sooner. Her warm hand rests gently on his head, and he finds himself unable to stop the fresh tears. The scene shifts as a heavy door suddenly slams open, echoing through the workshop. A knight named Master Argo storms inside, rudely demanding an immediate enchantment. Both Fake and Alicia jump in surprise at the knight's sudden and arrogant intrusion. Alicia maintains her composure and politely thanks Knight Argos for his service to the kingdom. Argos freezes in shock, his eyes widening as he realizes the high noble Alicia is standing right there. He quickly changes his tune, acting friendly toward Fake only because Alicia is watching him. Alicia watches the exchange with a piercing, silent gaze that makes Argos visibly nervous. Trying to look important, the knight orders Fake to get to work on enchanting his blade. Fake focuses his energy as glowing magical script begins to swirl around the steel sword. He notices the blade is almost shattered and realizes Argos has been using it incredibly recklessly. Politely but firmly, Fake warns the knight to be more careful with how much power he exerts. Argos scowls at the advice, spitefully retorting that Fake only says that because he lacks talent. The arrogant knight dismisses the warning and demands that Fake simply make the magic stronger. Fake explains that ordinary knight swords have physical limits that magic cannot fully overcome. He warns that if Argos continues to fight so recklessly, even the strongest enchantment will break. With a final surge of magic, Fake completes the restoration of the knight's damaged weapon. He hands the sword back, his expression professional despite the knight's constant insults. Argos scoffs and turns toward the door, clearly eager to get away from the awkward situation. Alicia dismisses the knight and suggests taking a walk around the palace grounds with Fake. Argos bows low, excusing himself with a stiff and formal tone before hurrying away. The knight disappears through the door, leaving a heavy silence behind in the workshop. Fake clenches his jaw, feeling utterly pathetic for being bullied in front of the girl he loves. Alicia steps closer, her voice trembling with worry as she warns him that his body will eventually break. He shakes his head, explaining that quitting here would mean he can never work as a smith again. He reveals that Forge Master Morgan has already threatened to revoke his official blacksmith's license. Without his certification, he explains that he could even be arrested for trying to forge in secret. Alicia gazes at him, her heart breaking for the impossible choice he's been forced to make. Suddenly, she reaches out and takes both of his hands into her own, her grip surprisingly firm. She looks him straight in the eyes and declares that she came here today specifically to talk to him. Fake stares at her in confusion, wondering what kind of plan she could possibly have to discuss. Alicia's face flushes a deep pink as she struggles to find the right words for her next statement. With a sudden burst of courage, she asks him why they shouldn't just get married. Fake's mind goes completely blank as he stares at her in absolute, wide-eyed shock. He wonders frantically if the word marriage has a completely different meaning in her country. His voice cracks as he tries to repeat the first half of the word in sheer disbelief. Alicia finishes the sentence for him, her blush deepening as she confirms exactly what she meant. He freaks out at the realization, his mind racing with images of them living together forever. Alicia gives a shy, determined nod, confirming that she is being completely serious about the proposal. Fake realizes with a start that the meaning is exactly what he thought, and his heart begins to race. He stands frozen in the workshop, his mind screaming in confusion at the sudden proposal. Introducing the bright future of the court blacksmith. Fake looks down, sweating and completely flustered by her sudden marriage proposal. Alicia frantically waves her hands, stammering that she didn't mean it in a weird way. She fidgets nervously, her cheeks flushing a deep pink as she tries to explain herself. She reveals she has many potential fiancés and desperately needs him to act as her protection to avoid marrying them. Fake is completely stunned, wondering how a simple blacksmith like him could ever convince high-ranking nobles. Alicia explains that she actually comes from a noble family of renowned blacksmiths who once presented a national treasure sword to the king. She adds that her family must maintain blacksmithing blood, leaving Fake utterly confused about what that has to do with him. Realizing her true meaning, he notes that her family simply wants her to marry someone genuinely skilled at the forge. She stares deeply into his eyes and formally asks if he will be her fiancé. Fake scratches his cheek nervously as she desperately pleads for his help. She begs him to act as her fake fiancé to ward off suitors until she finds a man she truly loves. She sweetens the deal by promising that if he comes to her country, he can get a real license and escape his daily torture. Fake sadly declines, believing his skills are far too poor to meet her noble family's high standards. Alicia fiercely interrupts, declaring that she has always believed he possesses more talent than anyone else in the entire department. She gazes at him warmly, praising his incredible dedication and earnestness just as much as his raw talent. The two share a tender, silent moment as her genuine words finally sink into his heart. Breaking the comfortable silence, she softly repeats her request for him to be her fiancé. Fake looks into her eyes, completely moved by her unwavering kindness and support. He realizes just how incredibly cute and endlessly kind she has always been to him. She smiles so warmly that he silently admits he is struggling not to see her as a beautiful woman. He gently takes her hand and agrees to the plan, playfully asking what will happen if their disguise actually works. Alicia touches her lip nervously, secretly thinking to herself that she wouldn't mind if their relationship became real. Fake internally panics, completely overwhelmed by how incredibly cute she is acting. He grounds himself by remembering it is only a cover relationship, even as the word fiancé echoes in his mind. He humbly assumes she only suggested the fake engagement out of pity because he has nowhere else to go. Convinced she doesn't actually want a real romance, he firmly accepts his supporting role. He eagerly declares he would love to be her fiancé, happy just to live near her and forge weapons. Alicia's eyes widen in sheer, breathless surprise at his enthusiastic acceptance. She excitedly grabs his arms to ask if he is truly sure, making him stammer out a nervous confirmation. She happily plans for them to leave together on Monday morning right after the royal ball. Fake suddenly worries, recalling that he is strictly required to give 2 weeks' notice before quitting his job. He desperately hopes that having Alicia's backing will save him from another brutal beating from his master. He nervously uses formal titles, but she immediately cuts him off with a cute pout. She insists he drop the stiff honorifics since they are now fiancés, completely ignoring their social gap. Fake awkwardly agrees and scratches his head while she smiles up at him brightly. She giggles softly, clearly delighted by his shy and flustered reaction. He smiles back, finally feeling a warm glimmer of genuine hope for his future. The scene shifts to the grand, imposing exterior of the royal palace under a cloudy sky. Inside the forge, Fake stands firmly before his cruel superiors to deliver his official resignation. He bows his head and states he wants to quit for personal reasons, admitting he cannot take the abuse anymore. Forge Master Morgan explodes in absolute, terrifying rage, screaming at him in sheer disbelief. The corrupt smiths surround him, mocking his incompetence and sneering that a commoner will never survive out there. Fake trembles in raw terror as the abusive men crowd around to intimidate him. He realizes that normally he would have backed down immediately just to avoid their violent wrath. Remembering his precious promise to Alicia, he finds the inner strength to stand his ground. He clenches his jaw tightly, absolutely refusing to surrender to his fear. Looking Morgan dead in the eye, he loudly demands to quit, declaring he can no longer endure the grueling work. Morgan sneers down at him, aggressively asking what kind of job a failure like him could possibly have lined up. Fake doesn't hesitate, confidently replying that he already has a great job waiting for him. Morgan glares menacingly and strictly demands that Fake hand over his official blacksmithing license. Fake obediently reaches into his apron and pulls out his precious, hard-earned credential. A tense, heavy silence hangs in the air as Fake reluctantly hands over his certification. Without a single second of hesitation, Morgan aggressively snatches the card straight from Fake's hand. With a loud, sickening snap, Morgan brutally shatters the magical license completely in half. Morgan laughs cruelly, officially declaring Fake disqualified from ever working as a blacksmith in the country again. The master mocks him, stating he will only get his license reissued if he stays and acts as their slave. Morgan smirks arrogantly, offering to let him actually forge weapons only after another full year of miserable labor. Unbroken, Fake simply turns his back on his abusers, declaring he is entirely done with this corrupt country. Morgan's smug expression instantly shatters into absolute, wide-eyed shock as Fake confidently walks away forever. Morgan stands aggressively over Fake, warning him that illegal forging will lead to immediate arrest by the knights, but Fake remains entirely unfazed. The cruel master sneers that no one else will hire an incompetent failure, threatening that if Fake leaves now, he is completely on his own. Fake turns his back and walks toward the exit as the corrupt smiths laughingly mock his foolishness. Striding purposefully away from his abusers, Fake firmly swears to himself that he will never return to this hell. Stepping out into the grand hallway, he suddenly stops as he notices a familiar figure waiting for him. His eyes widen in sheer surprise as he sees Alicia standing beautifully by the wall. Alicia smiles warmly and asks if he finished his resignation, to which he awkwardly confirms that he has. Fake blushes heavily and breaks into a nervous sweat, desperately hoping she didn't hear the embarrassing things he just said inside. The heavy workshop door suddenly bursts open behind them as Morgan storms out, freezing in absolute shock upon spotting the high-ranking noblewoman. Instantly changing his tune, Morgan bows subserviently and falsely praises Alicia's beauty while Fake watches the shameless display. Completely ignoring the groveling master, Alicia turns her sweet smile to Fake and politely asks if his work is finished. Morgan and his crony stare in absolute bewilderment at her blatant disregard for them. Desperate to regain control, Morgan immediately begins badmouthing Fake, falsely claiming the boy is a talentless and dishonest worker. Alicia simply smiles with cheerful radiance and casually announces that Fake's next job will be at her own estate. Morgan's jaw drops as his brain completely short-circuits at the shocking revelation. Fake is just as confused by the sudden declaration, staring blankly as the sweating master attempts to process the news. Frantically trying to ruin the deal, Morgan aggressively insists that Fake is entirely incompetent at both crafting and enchanting. Alicia smoothly dismisses his desperate warnings, stating she saw genuine talent in the young blacksmith and fully intends to take him in. In a pathetic attempt to win her favor, Morgan arrogantly asks why a beautiful noble wouldn't prefer a real man like himself instead. The bearded master steps uncomfortably close to Alicia, trying to look charming as he demands to know if he is better than his former apprentice. Alicia's warm smile vanishes instantly as she completely shuts down his advances with a cold and merciless rejection. Turning her back on the shattered master, she happily grabs Fake's arm and cheerfully declares it is time to leave. She gently intertwines her slender fingers with his, leading him away from the toxic workshop forever. Fake lets out a breathless sigh as they walk hand in hand down the bright palace corridor. Alicia smiles softly to herself, secretly happy to play the role of his devoted fiancé in disguise. A deep blush spreads across Fake's face as he realizes his genuine feelings for her are growing stronger by the second. A sweeping view reveals a peaceful, sprawling town bathed in warm morning light. Meanwhile, a horse-drawn carriage briskly departs the Revenant Empire, carrying Fake and Alicia toward a brand new future. Sitting quietly inside the bouncing carriage, Fake notes that they are heading directly south toward the kingdom of Narsti. Alicia gazes out the window with a serene, hopeful smile as the vibrant scenery rolls by. She casually explains that her father is eagerly waiting for them in the nearby Bernest territory. After a long, exhausting day of traveling by carriage, they finally arrive at the grand gates of their destination. Stepping out into the fresh air, Fake stretches his arms high with a satisfied groan while Alicia gently asks if he is tired. Lowering his arms, he assures her he isn't tired at all but secretly wonders if their wild plan will actually go smoothly. He smiles brightly, admitting that a simple carriage ride is absolutely nothing compared to his old days of endless, sleepless labor. Alicia cheerfully mentions she already contacted her father, making Fake sweat nervously at the impending meeting. Staring up at the massive estate, Fake internally panics over the sheer, terrifying scale of deceiving one of Narsti's top 3 noblemen. Clutching his chest to steady his racing heart, he desperately tries to convince himself this is just a normal family greeting. Noticing his severe anxiety, Alicia steps closer and gently takes his calloused hand into her own. With a shy, beautiful blush dusting her cheeks, she admits she wants to hold hands because she is feeling a little nervous too. Impressed by her flawless acting, Fake vows to play his part perfectly to repay her for saving his life from the abusive forge. Determined to be a brave and supportive partner, he firmly grasps her hand and readily agrees to follow her lead. Without warning, he suddenly pulls her close, causing Alicia to let out a startled, high-pitched yelp. Realizing his awkward mistake, he frantically apologizes and explains he thought being affectionate would make their cover much more convincing. Alicia stares at him in breathless shock, her beautiful face flushing a deep, vibrant crimson. Recovering quickly, she happily latches onto his arm and assures him that she doesn't mind the surprise at all. Sweating profusely, Fake bows his head in deep shame and desperately apologizes for acting like a terrible creep. Alicia immediately waves off his frantic apologies, insisting with a warm smile that he did absolutely nothing wrong. Leaning in close with a teasing glint in her eye, she whispers that she actually enjoyed the sudden romantic gesture. Fake scratches the back of his head with an awkward, booming laugh, completely overwhelmed by her adorable reaction. He quickly realizes she is just playing into their fake engagement, marveling at her incredible dedication to the dramatic role. Forcing a strained smile, A single drop of sweat rolls down his cheek as he struggles to keep his composure around her. Inside the grand manor, a fiercely intimidating older man glares silently ahead with a terrifyingly stern expression. Slouching regally on a lavish sofa, Alicia's father fixes a piercing, judgmental stare directly onto the young blacksmith. Alicia and Fake stand stiffly at attention, bracing themselves under the powerful nobleman's heavy, evaluating gaze. Breaking the tense silence, Alicia proudly declares that her fiancé's blacksmithing skills are completely unmatched by anyone. Intrigued by his daughter's incredibly bold claim, the imposing nobleman slowly rises to his feet. With a swift, practiced motion, the Duke draws a massive, heavy broadsword from its ornate scabbard. Holding the heavy blade outward, he strictly orders Fake to completely restore the faded magical enchantments resting upon the steel. Without a single moment of hesitation, Fake confidently accepts the daunting, high-stakes challenge. Taking the massive weapon into his hands, he expertly angles the heavy blade to catch the ambient light. He instantly recognizes the intricate, high-level magic woven into the steel, noting it belongs to a prestigious knight captain. His eyes widen in pure awe as he marvels at the incredibly complex and beautiful combination of runic lettering. The stern Duke brutally warns that if the sword isn't perfectly repaired within 1 week, Fake will be thrown out onto the street. Ignoring the harsh threat, Fake calmly states that the delicate repairs won't actually take very long at all. He confidently explains that since the original magical foundation is still mostly intact, the restoration process is completely straightforward. Summoning a glowing magical interface, his fingers dance rapidly through the air to manually input the missing runic characters. The Duke watches in stunned, absolute silence as the young man effortlessly manipulates the incredibly complex magical script. Brilliant lines of glowing text swirl around Fake's fingertips as he seamlessly bridges the shattered magical arrays back together. Fake humbly apologizes, noting that while he cannot perfectly replicate the original creator's style, he guarantees the exact same physical performance. With a final sharp burst of light, the magical runes lock firmly into place, and Fake cheerfully announces that the job is done. Bowing respectfully, the young blacksmith presents the fully restored, magically humming broadsword back to the towering nobleman. The Duke snatches the weapon, his eyes narrowing sharply as he meticulously inspects the newly reinforced steel edge. Without warning, the older man unleashes a blindingly fast, devastating horizontal slash straight through the empty air. He halts the massive blade instantly, staring intently at the shimmering metal to gauge the restored magical resonance. A heavy, nerve-wracking silence blankets the grand room as the Duke silently contemplates the young man's miraculous handiwork. Fake breaks into a cold sweat, desperately praying to himself that he didn't somehow botch the delicate, high-level enchantment. With a sharp, satisfying metallic ring, the Duke smoothly slides the heavy broadsword back into its ornate scabbard. Looking directly at Fake, the Duke bluntly admits he never expected a scruffy commoner to possess such incredible, flawless skill. Relief washing over him, Fake beams with a bright, enthusiastic smile and loudly thanks the imposing Duke for his high praise. Suddenly furious, the stubborn father points a commanding finger and roars that he still strictly refuses to accept Fake as his daughter's husband. While Alicia sighs at her father's typical stubbornness, Fake inwardly smiles, realizing the intimidating Duke is actually just a big softy. Bowing deeply, Fake promises to keep working hard, prompting the Duke to officially grant him full, unrestricted access to the family's private workshop. The Duke then hands over a brand new, official blacksmithing license for their country, promising to provide absolutely any materials Fake could ever need. Fake stares at the glowing magical license in his trembling hands, completely overwhelmed by the realization that he is finally allowed to forge freely. Tears of pure, unadulterated joy well up in his eyes as he realizes his dark days of miserable slavery are officially over forever. Fake beams with sheer joy, loudly thanking the Duke for finally giving him the chance to do real blacksmithing. The Duke explains he must leave on business and casually mentions that the mansion's knights might request some weapons from Fake. Before departing, the imposing Duke shoots a terrifying glare and strictly orders Fake not to try anything inappropriate with his daughter. Trembling under the sudden threat, Fake frantically waves his hands and swears he won't do anything of the sort. Looking out the tall window, Fake breathes a massive sigh of relief that he managed to convince the terrifying nobleman. Alicia smiles brightly, noting that it is incredibly rare for her strict father to praise someone's skills so highly. Fake silently hopes his display of skill managed to repay Alicia at least a little bit for saving his life. His thoughts are interrupted as a young maid stops before him and respectfully bows her head in greeting. He blinks in mild surprise at the sudden, polite introduction. The poised maid introduces herself as Leffy and offers to give them a complete tour of the sprawling mansion. Leffy smiles with warm, professional grace as she awaits their command. Fake cheerfully introduces himself while Alicia happily asks the maid to lead the way. The grand exterior of the magnificent noble estate gleams brightly under the clearing sky. Leffy leads them through a lavish entryway decorated with an enormous, ornate chandelier and fresh flowers. They pass through a cozy, sunlit parlor draped with elegant curtains and fine furnishings. Opening a heavy door, Leffy reveals a fully equipped blacksmithing workshop prepared exclusively for Alicia's future husband. Fake steps inside and observes the layout, noting that the basic setup looks fairly standard. His eyes suddenly light up at the sight of a traditional furnace, marveling that he hasn't used real physical tools in years. Leffy presents a chest overflowing with rare materials, prompting Fake to excitedly plan his upcoming forging projects. Finishing the workshop tour, the polite maid offers to show Fake directly to his personal living quarters. They arrive before a set of massive, beautifully carved double doors leading to his new room. Leffy gracefully pushes the heavy doors open, revealing the luxurious space waiting inside. Fake cheerfully thanks her for the excellent tour while Leffy reminds him to simply call if he needs absolutely anything. A massive, incredibly soft-looking canopy bed dominates the center of the extravagant bedroom. Exhausted from the chaotic day, Fake slumps onto a plush sofa and lets out a long, heavy sigh. He stares thoughtfully out the large window, amazed at how drastically his miserable life has improved in just a few days. He shudders slightly, remembering how he was trapped in a hellish job where he could collapse and die at any moment. He acknowledges the engagement is fake but secretly admits that having such a kind, beautiful girl as his faux wife is wonderful. Throwing himself backward onto the massive bed, he stretches his arms wide and revels in his newfound freedom. He laughs in pure joy, realizing he no longer has to suffer through sleepless nights and impossible deadlines. He quickly shakes his head, realizing that slacking off completely would ruin his reputation and jeopardize his cover story. Resting his head against the soft pillows, he stares up at the ceiling in complete, unfamiliar peace. He quietly marvels at the strange, wonderful sensation of having absolutely nothing forced upon him. Filled with genuine excitement, he decides to start his true blacksmithing journey tomorrow without the fear of abuse. Drifting into a comfortable rest, he smiles brightly and hopes that every single day moving forward will be exactly this happy. The title page announces the highly anticipated third chapter of the court blacksmith's happy new life. Fake blushes deeply as he earnestly asks to be her fiancée if she will have him. Alicia smiles softly with a delicate blush, deeply moved by his sincere proposal. The maid Leffy reports that Fake has been safely escorted to his room without any issues. Alicia sighs in relief, happily noting that the introduction to her father went far better than expected. Leffy tilts her head and bluntly asks Alicia how far her relationship with Fake has actually progressed. The maid points out that Alicia's original plan was to simply ask Fake to marry her outright. Alicia flushes bright red and defensively shouts that she did her absolute best to propose. Her eyes swirl with embarrassment as she realizes how incredibly bold her sudden marriage proposal truly was. Leffy looks completely confused by the chaotic explanation and asks when the actual wedding date will be. A heavy, awkward silence falls between the two girls as the reality of the fake engagement hangs in the air. Meanwhile, the grand architecture of the royal palace stands quietly under a cloudy sky. Alicia frantically defends her clumsy proposal while Leffy calmly pieces together the truth behind the fake engagement. Leffy dryly notes that Alicia's genuine romantic feelings are incredibly obvious to anyone paying attention. The maid teases her lady with a smug smile, repeatedly calling her massive crush completely obvious. Alicia holds her burning cheeks in despair, realizing her supposedly perfect acting didn't hide her true feelings at all. Leffy ruthlessly suggests rushing the official marriage registration before the strict duke can stop them. They strategize that Fake must first prove his incredible forging abilities to fully win over Master Gorel. Alicia clenches her fist, knowing her prestigious blacksmithing family demands a highly skilled partner. She looks down with a melancholic gaze, acutely aware that noble daughters rarely get to marry for true love. Looking up with newfound hope, she quietly notes that everything would be perfect if she could just marry Fake. Staring out the window with a bright smile, she happily realizes she might actually get to marry the man she loves. The scene shifts back to the royal court, where Forge Master Morgan and his corrupt smiths lounge in a parlor. Two of the corrupt apprentices sweat nervously, clearly anxious about their mounting, unfinished workload. Master Morgan strokes his beard with a smug, malicious expression as he plots his next cruel move. The lazy smiths complain about needing a new chore boy, annoyed that Fake hasn't come crawling back yet. Morgan arrogantly dismisses the need to hire a replacement, completely confident in his twisted logic. One of the men nervously brings up the prestigious Bernest family that unexpectedly took Fake away. They gossip about the powerful dukedom and the strict rumor that they only seek top-tier blacksmiths for marriage. The abusers cruelly mock Fake's physical weakness, entirely convinced that the elite family will immediately reject him. The corrupt men laughingly agree that Fake will inevitably be fired for incompetence and forced to return. Pointing his finger with absolute arrogance, Morgan declares that the homeless failure will return begging within a week. They maliciously plot to pile up 2 entire weeks of grueling maintenance work to punish Fake the moment he returns. The incredibly lazy smiths decide to simply abandon their duties completely until their former slave comes back. Morgan imagines a defeated, miserable Fake being brutally punished for daring to leave his post. The corrupt master orders his men to lie to the royal knights to excuse their complete lack of work. Laughing maniacally, Morgan promises to treat the returning boy even worse than before to shatter his spirit. The cruel master sneers into the distance, eagerly awaiting the chance to utterly destroy the incompetent boy's dreams. Fake wakes up slowly, feeling completely horrible after another restless night. He curses his deeply ingrained habits as he realizes he woke up before sunrise yet again. He remembers his brutal old schedule at the court, where he was forced to work alone from dawn until past midnight. Sitting up in his luxurious new bed, he realizes that waking up this early now leaves him with absolutely nothing to do. Entering the grand workshop, he happily notes that it has been a very long time since he last visited a proper forge. He stretches his arms wide with a satisfied groan, eagerly preparing to start his first real day of work. He holds up a glowing, facete stone, genuinely impressed by the high quality of the witch iron. He recalls that witch iron is a magical ore essential for blacksmithing since enchantments can only be applied to items made from it. Most importantly, he notes that this precious magical ore is incredibly easy to collect from defeated demons. Unlike normal iron that requires constantly searching for new mines, gathering witch iron simply requires a successful demon hunt. He reaches out to grab his heavy protective gear from the nearby workbench. Slipping on a pair of thick demon leather gloves, he happily notes they are sturdy enough to withstand extreme heat. He explains that blacksmiths utilize fire, water, and earth magic, starting the process with a simple fire spell. Igniting a swirling magical flame in his palm, he notes that witch iron comes in various distinct types and qualities. He mentally categorizes the ore grades, ranging from the common F rare all the way up to the ultimate S rare quality. Inspecting the workshop supply, he observes that the iron provided is mostly common F-rare and E-rare material. Deciding to just relax and make a simple knife today, he confidently applies his fiery magic to the raw ore. The magical ore glows a brilliant, burning red as he prepares to move on to the delicate molding process. He intensifies the magical flames, noting that traditional fire pits are rarely used for tempering anymore. The intense, magical heat successfully softens the sturdy metal to the perfect, workable consistency. Using his earth magic, he expertly forms a rectangular clay mold to catch the liquid metal. He carefully pours the glowing, molten iron directly into the freshly made earthen mold. After shaping the metal, he rapidly cools the glowing clay mold using a burst of water magic. He successfully breaks away the cooled clay to reveal a solid, rectangular plate of raw metal. Placing the metal plate on an anvil, he heats it slightly before striking it rhythmically with a heavy mallet. A bright blush spreads across his face as he enthusiastically admits he absolutely loves the satisfying sound of the hammer. He repeatedly heats and cools the metal, carefully listening to the unique resonance of the witch iron. This repetitive, rhythmic process actually purifies the metal and permanently increases its magical rarity. Realizing he doesn't have much time today, he decides to simply prepare some refined iron beforehand for future projects. Satisfied with the blade's basic shape, he excitedly prepares to paint on a layer of sintered clay. He explains that the clay coating strengthens the magical information and permanently hardens the metal as it cools. He summons a floating sphere of low-temperature water to safely quench the scorching hot blade. Plunging the glowing metal directly into the water, a massive cloud of steam instantly erupts into the air. Wiping the cooled blade clean, he greatly admires the beautiful ripple pattern left behind by the clay. Declaring it is finally time to sharpen the edge, he enthusiastically readies his powerful wind magic. Fierce blades of magical wind swirl rapidly around the steel, honing the dull edge to absolute perfection. He holds up the freshly polished blade, deeply admiring its brilliant, mirror-like shine in the light. With the physical forging completely done, he focuses his inner energy to begin the magical enchantment process. Glowing magical runes seamlessly materialize and wrap tightly around the finished steel blade. Beaming with immense pride, he happily announces that the enchanted knife is finally complete and ready for testing. He casually tosses a solid, heavy block of iron high into the air to test the blade's true sharpness. With a swift, fluid motion, he effortlessly slices the falling iron block perfectly in half. The heavy iron halves crash cleanly onto the floor, undeniably proving the new knife's incredible cutting power. Smiling in pure satisfaction, he happily confirms that both the weight and sharpness are absolutely flawless. He meticulously wraps the hilt, noting that the entire process took him about 3 hours since he was slightly out of practice. Stretching with a wide yawn, he suddenly realizes he completely forgot to eat breakfast. He turns around and freezes in absolute shock upon discovering Alicia standing quietly right behind him. The two stare at each other in stunned, wide-eyed silence as the awkward realization firmly sets in. He leaps backward in sheer, terrified panic upon learning she has been secretly watching him for an entire hour. Alicia cheerfully explains she came to visit after Leffy mentioned he was already hard at work in the forge. She smiles incredibly sweetly and brushes her hair aside, praising his intense and unwavering focus. He stares blankly at her delicate features, completely captivated by her overwhelming, elegant beauty. A deep, furious blush completely takes over his face as his heart begins to race uncontrollably. He nervously averts his eyes, desperately struggling to maintain his composure around his beautiful fake fiancée. Blushing heavily herself, Alicia shyly asks him to stop staring at her so intensely because it is embarrassing. He frantically waves his hands in the air and shouts out a desperate, panicked apology for staring. Covering his burning face with his hand, he silently curses himself for being so incredibly obvious. He awkwardly blurts out an apology by admitting she simply looked too cute, causing her to stammer in sheer surprise. Flushing a vibrant crimson, she shyly whispers that since they are engaged, it is perfectly fine for him to look at her. His brain completely short-circuits in raw panic as he desperately reminds himself that their engagement is strictly fake. Showing Fake and Alicia blushing nervously next to each other. Alicia apologizes for ignoring him earlier, happily admitting she came all the way to the forge just to watch him work. Fake stares at her radiant smile, silently thinking to himself that her blinding beauty is completely unfair. Stepping closer, Alicia cheerfully asks if she can take a look at the weapon he was forging. Blushing slightly, Fake eagerly agrees and gestures toward the workbench where his finished knife rests. Alicia gently picks up the crafted knife, turning it over in her hands with a bright, impressed smile. Fake watches her closely from behind, the heavy straps of his blacksmithing apron resting across his sturdy shoulders. Alicia stares in absolute awe at the incredibly sharp and perfectly enchanted blade, completely shocked that it was made from common rare witch iron. Fake humbly accepts her praise, secretly wishing he had spent more time crafting something even better for her to see. Without warning, Alicia suddenly drops into a practiced combat stance and swiftly slashes the knife through the air. She smiles warmly and reveals she learned some self-defense swordplay, prompting Fake to ask if she has actual experience wielding knives. With incredible dexterity, she smoothly twirls the sharp blade around her fingers. She catches the hilt perfectly, locking the weapon into a firm, practiced grip. Slashing the air with rapid, precise movements, she demonstrates a startling level of combat proficiency. Fake watches in complete surprise, silently impressed by her unexpectedly flawless knife skills. She smoothly brings the blade to a halt, finishing her impressive little demonstration with perfect form. Noticing his intense gaze, Alicia halts her movements and nervously asks if she did something strange. Without thinking, he blatantly admits that he was completely captivated by how beautiful she looked while moving. Alicia blushes vibrantly at the sudden compliment, stammering out a flustered response as she processes his bold words. She stares deeply into his eyes, her cheeks burning a bright crimson under his unwavering gaze. Realizing exactly what he just blurted out, Fake frantically touches his cheek and repeats that she was extremely beautiful. Stepping into his personal space, she gently tugs at his shirt and softly demands that he look her in the eyes and say it again. Fake's eyes widen in absolute shock as his heart races out of control. He awkwardly averts his gaze but obediently confirms once more that she looked incredibly beautiful. Alicia gazes up at him with a soft, affectionate expression, completely disarming his defenses. Caught in the romantic tension, Fake inwardly marvels at her flawless acting skills and briefly wonders if her feelings might actually be genuine. He quickly brushes the hopeful thought aside as mere hearsay, right before a loud growl suddenly erupts from his empty stomach. Alicia bursts into a sweet giggle at the sudden noise, while Fake awkwardly clutches his stomach in deep embarrassment. Breaking the tension, she cheerfully suggests they head straight to the dining room for a late breakfast. Fake happily agrees but politely asks for a quick moment to wash the forged soot off in the shower first. The grand exterior of the Bernest family estate sits peacefully under the clear morning sky. Inside the brightly lit dining room, a lavish table is set perfectly for two. Sitting across from him, Alicia curiously asks if he ever struggled with the difficult art of enchanting. Fake wipes his brow, explaining that his abusive, solitary workload at the court forcefully trained him to enchant with rapid perfection. A maid rolls in a massive cart of delicious food while Alicia warmly expresses how incredibly happy she is to share a meal with him. Fake blushes softly, suddenly realizing that the wonderful smell of baking bread he noticed earlier was being prepared specifically for them. He reaches out and gently tears open a warm, freshly baked roll. Taking an eager bite, he closes his eyes to fully savor the comforting flavor. A soft, fluffy warmth immediately fills his mouth, melting away all his lingering exhaustion. He silently marvels at the incredible, overwhelming deliciousness of the simple meal. Overwhelmed by the sudden luxury, he admits to himself that the food is simply far too good for a commoner like him. Warm tears unexpectedly stream down his face, prompting Alicia to panic and desperately ask what is wrong. She leans forward in deep concern, frantically pointing out his sudden tears. Quickly wiping his eyes with a napkin, Fake stammers out a hasty apology for his embarrassing emotional outburst. Calming down, Alicia softly asks him to share his story, genuinely wanting to understand his deep pain. Fake confesses that during his hellish court days, he only swallowed tasteless food out of pure necessity while working endlessly without breaks. He flashes a brilliant, grateful smile and proudly declares that these are simply tears of pure happiness because he gets to share such a wonderful meal with her. Deeply moved by his earnest confession, Alicia smiles back with misty eyes and a bright blush. Looking over the massive feast, she warmly encourages him to take all the time he needs to properly enjoy every single bite. Later, they ride a grand horse-drawn carriage as Alicia excitedly announces her plan to show him around the local town. The bustling, vibrant town stretches out below a towering stone clock tower. Alicia pulls a heavy cloak over her head, prompting Fake to ask if such an extreme disguise is truly necessary. Fake suddenly remembers Leffy's earlier warning that the townspeople might easily recognize the noble duke's daughter. Closing her eyes with a confident smile, Alicia bluntly admits that she is incredibly popular in town strictly because of her overwhelming good looks. Fake recoils slightly in sheer surprise at her bold, unapologetic vanity just as she suddenly leans in close. With a bright, teasing blush, she happily declares that their secret outing feels exactly like a romantic date. Fake stares at her in utter confusion, silently questioning why a high-ranking noble is going through so much trouble to act romantic. Alicia's cheerful smile instantly shatters into a blank, horrifying mask of pure shock. Tears abruptly well up in her trembling eyes as she completely fails to process his brutally dense reaction. Completely oblivious to her genuine heartbreak, Fake aggressively reminds her that there is no logical reason for her to date him since their engagement is entirely fake. Fake ponders that working hard and gaining her father's approval should finally resolve their complicated situation. He reminds Alicia that he is merely a cover and that she gains nothing by pretending to go on romantic dates with a simple blacksmith. Deep down, Duke Gorrel wanted his daughter to find a loving marriage and specifically hoped she would marry a talented blacksmith. Leffy suddenly appears, startling the pair as she suggests this is why the Duke hasn't forced a marriage yet. Blushing intensely, Alicia shouts that this date is important to her and insists that he stop worrying about the benefits. Caught off guard by her passion, Fake can only offer a stunned and simple confirmation. Leffy takes her leave with a polite bow, wishing the couple a wonderful time on their outing. Marveling at the maid's stealth, Fake feels a strange sense of comfort knowing that a special escort like Leffy is watching over their relationship. Alicia turns back to him, determined to continue with the next phase of her plan to appeal to her father's expectations. With a shy and hopeful expression, she softly asks if she might be allowed to hold his hand. Fake stands frozen for a moment, his face flushing as he processes the intimacy of her request. Their fingers remain tentative as they slowly move to close the distance between them. He realizes that maintaining the ruse for the Duke requires them to display this level of affection in public. Alicia agrees with a deep blush, noting that they must look the part in case any patrolling knights are watching. Their fingers finally interlock, creating a firm and warm connection as they walk together. Though they have touched before, Fake finds himself far more self-conscious now that their walk is officially a date. Feeling the unusual warmth of her palm, he wonders if there is any chance she truly sees him as more than just a fake fiancé. The couple blends into the bustling city crowds, enjoying the vibrant atmosphere of the busy streets. He reflects on his past, struggling to remember the last time he was able to walk through a city with such profound peace. Alicia promises him that his days of suffering are over and that he can finally live a leisurely and happy life. To protect this new lifestyle, Fake vows to hone his blacksmithing skills until he is worthy of the Duke's respect. Alicia asks him to promise he won't do anything reckless, to which he offers a sincere and steady confirmation. A grand view of the royal court's exterior stands quietly under the cloudy sky. A heavy crate overflows with dull, unenchanted knight swords awaiting maintenance. Forge Master Morgan slams his fist in rage, furious that over a week has passed without Fake returning to beg for his job back. His lackey nervously suggests that the incompetent boy might have been rejected by the nobles and is currently walking back on foot. Morgan sneers with vicious satisfaction, agreeing that returning to the abusive forge is the only fitting outcome for such a shabby commoner. He maliciously plots to force the unlicensed boy to reapply for his position the moment he crawls back. He eagerly declares that Fake will be forced to work completely unpaid for months before receiving a miserable salary. A sudden, sharp knock echoes rapidly against the heavy wooden door. Morgan's eyes widen with a sadistic gleam, entirely convinced that his broken former slave has finally returned. Throwing the door open with a cruel sneer, he immediately begins to insult the person standing outside. His arrogant smirk instantly vanishes as he realizes he is actually face to face with the prestigious knight captain. Sweating profusely, Morgan bows subserviently and frantically asks how he can assist the esteemed warrior. The towering knight captain firmly states that he has come to personally request a magical enchantment. He places his heavy broadsword on the table, casually asking if the master blacksmith is available to handle it. Morgan completely loses his mind with sheer joy, internally celebrating that the highest-ranked knight in the country is directly relying on him. As his lackeys watch in stunned disbelief, Morgan eagerly shouts that he will gladly take the request right now. The captain raises a hand to stop him, explaining that there is something important he must verify first. Gripping the hilt of a different blade, the captain firmly demands to meet the specific person who enchanted it. Morgan notes that the sword belongs to a common knight and nervously wonders if the captain came to complain about Fake's terrible handiwork. The captain softly murmurs that the modern knights are incredibly blessed to wield such fine weapons. Morgan stares in complete confusion as the elite warrior begins to reminisce about his own days as a common soldier. The captain recalls that the swords provided back then were barely enchanted and functioned mostly like normal, dull iron. Acknowledging the old, poor conditions, Morgan slowly nods along while trying to figure out where the conversation is going. The corrupt master silently mocks Fake's skills, entirely convinced that his own sloppy enchantments are far superior to the boy's. The captain cheerfully reveals that his personal genius blacksmith highly praised Fake's magnificent work, expressing a deep desire to have the boy enchant his sword. Morgan's jaw drops in absolute, horrified disbelief at the overwhelming praise directed toward his former punching bag. Stepping closer, the imposing knight captain sternly demands to know exactly where Fake is currently stationed. Morgan breaks into a cold sweat, his mind racing as he frantically wonders why the elite knight specifically wants his worst apprentice. The captain explains that since he cannot read magical script himself, he relied on his personal smith's glowing recommendation. Desperate to maintain control, Morgan lies through his teeth, claiming Fake is untalented and was forced to take time off. The corrupt master stubbornly rationalizes that Fake merely got lucky on a single blade out of the hundreds he was forced to process. Disappointed but understanding, the captain decides to leave his precious sword at the forge until Fake returns. Refusing to let the glorious opportunity slip away, Morgan arrogantly offers to personally enchant the blade instead. The captain agrees to leave the weapon, entirely unbothered by the wait since he assumes Fake will return from his supposed holiday very soon. The elite knight respectfully asks them to notify the garrison when the job is completely finished. The moment the door closes, Morgan snatches up the sword and furiously mocks the captain for being completely blind to magical information. He strokes his ego, fully convincing himself that if Fake's pathetic work was praised, his own enchantments will be remembered in history. The greedy master laughs maniacally, declaring that completing this task will be an absolute piece of cake. His confused apprentice steps forward, hesitantly asking what the master intends to do about the missing boy. Morgan completely dismisses his former slave, boldly announcing that he will cast the magical enchantment himself. He wildly claims that doing this will instantly secure his position as the personal blacksmith for the knight captain. The corrupt lackeys share a nervous, uncertain glance as they listen to their master's deeply delusional rant. They quietly murmur among themselves, worrying that actively stealing the requested job is far too sly and dangerous. Morgan fiercely silences them, arrogantly boasting that anyone could easily surpass the worthless enchantments made by Fake. He firmly crosses his arms, ruthlessly declaring that he alone created this grand opportunity and will reap all the rewards. His eyes burn with twisted ambition as he swears to carve his own name into the kingdom's history. He recalls his bitter past as the powerless fifth son of a count, marveling that such an incredible chance has finally fallen into his lap. Tightening his grip around the heavy sword, he eagerly prepares to falsely claim all the credit for the upcoming work. Staring intensely at the blade, the arrogant master notes that incredibly lucky men exist everywhere in the world. He points a thumb proudly at his own chest, entirely convinced that he is now the luckiest man alive. A dark, malicious chuckle escapes his lips as he begins to laugh at his perfectly stolen victory. Walking up the long stairs, Fake looks forward to seeing the best view in the entire city from the clock tower. Fake groans about the exhausting climb while Alicia cheerfully urges him to keep up. The romantic date continues as they ascend the towering structure. They finally reach the top, completely breathless as they take in the sprawling, sunlit cityscape. Bright sunlight washes over the grand, peaceful city. Alicia turns back with a bright blush, asking Fake what he thinks of her absolute favorite spot. Fake stares at her warmly and agrees that it is truly beautiful. They decide to stay until sunset to enjoy both the night view and the sunrise together. The towering clock stands silently against the passing clouds. Sweating from the climb, Fake shivers in the wind and suggests finding some shelter. Fake and Alicia stand on the balcony, completely oblivious to the other people around them. Nearby, another couple embraces tightly and shares a deep, passionate kiss. Fake's eyes go wide as his face instantly flushes a deep, burning red. Alicia turns and freezes in wide-eyed, absolute shock at the romantic display. Panicking that Alicia will be corrupted, Fake frantically suggests they go take a break somewhere else. They retreat to a quiet wooden bench on the stairs, sitting stiffly apart from each other. A heavy, intensely awkward silence blankets the blushing pair. Fake sweats nervously, painfully aware of the thick tension in the air. He desperately racks his brain to find absolutely anything to talk about. He awkwardly calls her name, making her jolt in surprise. With his face burning, he nervously asks if she would find doing that kind of stuff with him unpleasant. Alicia turns to him with a confused, completely blank expression. She stares at him in stunned silence, a deep blush creeping across her cheeks. Fake instantly regrets his words, sweating profusely under her gaze. Alicia looks down, hiding her flustered expression beneath her hood. Fake realizes his massive mistake and mentally scrambles to fix it. Frantically waving his hands, he backpedals and claims he isn't interested in her like that. He awkwardly reminds her that their relationship is fake, insisting she doesn't need to force herself to go so far. Alicia glares at him with tearful eyes, furiously calling him a cheating bastard for misunderstanding her feelings. As Fake begs her to listen, passing townspeople start gossiping that he was caught with a second woman. Fake looks completely horrified as the scandalous rumor instantly spreads. Alicia storms down the stairs while Fake desperately chases after her. He frantically clears the air, swearing that he wasn't having an affair and it was all a huge misunderstanding. A sudden, quiet pause falls over them as his desperate excuse sinks in. The sheer absurdity of the situation finally breaks the tension, and they both burst into genuine laughter. Smiling warmly, Alicia playfully warns him that real cheating is absolutely not allowed. Fake smiles back brightly, completely disarmed by her sudden charm. He blushes quietly, wondering if she was just joking or if she actually meant it. Later, a serious conversation begins back at the Grand Bernest estate. Duke Gorrel sternly tells Fake that it is time to demonstrate his true blacksmithing abilities. The Duke officially grants Fake a license to forge and sell goods in the city markets. Fake bows respectfully, eagerly accepting the Duke's challenge. The Duke strictly forbids Fake from using his fake engagement to Alicia to boost his business. Fake agrees and prepares to work, while the Duke grants him unlimited access to standard witch iron. Smiling confidently, Fake notes that basic E-rare iron is more than enough to craft high-quality civilian tools. Stepping out of the office, Fake breathes a massive sigh of relief. Pumping his fist with pure excitement, Fake happily declares that his real blacksmithing journey has finally begun. Fake ponders the quantity needed, deciding to forge longswords since they are the most common type bought in stores. He reasons that even a well-balanced product won't sell if it's too expensive, so he must carefully manage the overall quality. Since most adventurers are D or E rank, he decides they will be his primary customer base instead of the rare S ranks. Starting with mold making, he considers crafting something durable enough that adventurers won't need to constantly replace it between ranks. Realizing it has been a while since he last forged a proper longsword, he admits he will need to put in some serious effort. He focuses deeply, a slight sweat forming on his brow as he prepares for the delicate task ahead. Standing before the anvil, he carefully begins shaping the materials with a fierce, determined expression. He ensures his clay molds are perfectly formed and strong enough to withstand the intense heat without collapsing. Using his magic, he effortlessly melts the raw witch iron down to a glowing, volatile liquid state. He notes that after pouring the molten iron into the mold, he must use water magic to quickly cool it down. A sudden burst of water magic rapidly cools the scorching metal, sending a massive cloud of steam into the air. Wondering if the cooling process is finished, he decides to pull the freshly cast blade out for a quick inspection. He smiles in pure satisfaction, happily noting that the newly formed blade came out absolutely perfectly. Applying intense heat once again, he carefully tempers the metal to permanently increase its physical durability. With the heavy forging done, he uses precise wind magic to flawlessly polish the longsword's outer surface. He holds the finished blade up to the light, admiring the brilliant, star-like gleam reflecting off the polished steel. He meticulously prepares the tang and grip, crafting small wooden nails to hold the handle securely together. Fitting the handle to the tang, he hammers the wooden nails firmly into place, preferring this sturdy method of attachment. He turns his attention to a floating magical interface, readying himself to seamlessly apply the necessary enchantments. Wiping his brow with an exhausted sigh, he proudly looks at the completely finished, reliable longsword standing before him. Running his finger near the edge, he silently wonders if the freshly enchanted blade is truly sharp enough for combat. Eager to continue his momentum, he grabs another mold and cheerfully decides to make the next longsword using the exact same method. He recalls how the royal court demanded high-maintenance enchantments for elite knights, but notes that normal adventurers heavily prefer low-maintenance weapons. Time passes as the sun slowly sets, casting a warm, peaceful glow over the sprawling city. Exhausted but satisfied, he marvels at the fact that he successfully managed to craft 3 high-quality swords in one continuous session. He realizes his magical power reserves have vastly increased, directly resulting from the extreme, overburdened workload he endured at the royal court. Looking outside the window, he notices just how incredibly late in the evening it has finally become. He remembers that Alicia is supposed to be coming down to visit him in the workshop very soon. Looking down at a row of 5 beautifully crafted swords, he decides to officially call it a day. Before Alicia arrives, he heads toward the storage closet to find a towel so he can quickly wipe off his sweat. Just as he reaches for a fresh towel, he suddenly hears a familiar, beautiful voice calling his name from the main room. Alicia stands in the workshop, looking around in confusion as she searches the empty room for Fake. Fake pauses silently by the doorway with a towel in hand, slightly surprised by her sudden appearance. He silently notes to himself that there's no way he could have known she was already waiting in there. A playful, mischievous smirk suddenly spreads across his face as a fun idea forms in his mind. He slowly and quietly sneaks up right behind her, carefully muffling his footsteps against the stone floor. He startles her from behind, causing Alicia to leap forward and let out a loud, high-pitched scream. Fake bursts into uncontrollable laughter at his great success, while Alicia stares at him with a racing heart and a bright blush. Recovering from her sudden scare, Alicia puffs out her cheeks in an incredibly cute, highly embarrassed pout. She angrily demands to know where he was hiding, to which he smugly replies that he was just resting in the break room. Laughing heartily, he gloats over his flawless stealth attack while she continues to complain about the massive scare. Changing the subject with a sigh, she curiously asks if he managed to finish his blacksmithing work for the day. Alicia stares in absolute shock at the 5 finished swords, completely amazed by his incredible endurance and lightning speed. While she frantically insists he needs to rest, Fake casually notes that his hellish 3 years at the court made this workload feel entirely effortless. He happily realizes that his grueling past actually forced him to grow stronger, ultimately giving him a massive resistance to normal fatigue. Alicia stares at him with a massive sweat drop, awkwardly pointing out that he is completely and utterly addicted to working. Fake asks if he should try selling the weapons tomorrow, and Alicia happily confirms that merchants will be gathering in the city for the next 2 days. Pleased with the high quality of the E-rare witch iron blades, he eagerly decides to sell a few units to gauge the town's reaction. He fondly remembers having a great reputation back in his hometown, which originally earned him the prestigious court job in the first place. Staring up at the Grand Palace in his memories, he laments how the royal court cruelly pushed him past his limits while treating him like completely worthless trash. Fake confirms he has settled on a price, feeling more confident about his work now. He sets the price between 30,000 and 50,000 gold to reach D and E rank adventurers. Determined to succeed, he prepares to sell his first batch of longswords tomorrow. Alicia excitedly clenches her fists and announces that she will be helping him out too. He recalls the Duke's strict order never to mention their engagement during business. Fake realizes he isn't allowed to use Alicia's noble influence to sell his goods. Alicia suggests wearing a mask to hide her identity despite Fake's worries about being suspicious. She insists on helping because he is working so hard for her sake. Alicia leans in close and earnestly asks if they can handle the sales together. Fake stares at her in silence, caught off guard by her intense and sincere gaze. Alicia looks back at him with a determined and hopeful expression. With a soft smile, Fake eventually gives in and agrees to her request. Alicia beams with joy, her face lighting up at the prospect of working together. They decide to check with Duke Gorel first to see if he will let them work together. Later that night, a crescent moon hangs in the starry sky over the peaceful estate. Fake lies in bed with his hands behind his head as bells ring in the distance. He jolts in surprise when he hears Alicia calling his name through the door. He opens the door to find Alicia waiting there and asks her how the meeting went. Alicia gives a cute peace sign and giggles, clearly excited about the next day. Alicia confirms her father said it was okay, provided she hides her identity. Pumping her fist, she vows to convince everyone that his weapons are the absolute best. Fake thanks her warmly, silently moved by how much she is willing to do for him. Staring at his hands, he realizes this will be his very first real business venture. He reflects on his past where he bartered for necessities before entering the royal court. He remembers smithing in a small village where craftsmen shared knowledge and learned together. He admits that his time at court left him ignorant of the modern market's complexity. Despite the challenge, he decides to embrace the business side of being a blacksmith. On the vibrant marketplace stalls prepared for a busy day of trade. Determined to succeed, Fake marches forward to enter the bustling city market. He explains that paying a small fee at the entrance allows anyone to sell their goods for the day. With a nervous blush, he notes that this daily permit is his first step toward independence. Fake carefully counts out the coins needed to secure his spot in the market. Alicia stands ready beside him, wearing a hooded cloak and a decorative mask to hide her noble identity. Fake leans in and asks if he should avoid using her real name while they are in public. Alicia confirms they must be extremely careful to keep her father from finding out about their partnership. She thoughtfully suggests he use a nickname, wondering if Ali would be a suitable choice. Fake happily agrees to call her Ali whenever they are working outside together. He observes the area, noting that selling on non-market days would require a permanent store and more paperwork. Despite the challenge, he dreams of working his way up from a simple stall to a proper shop. He proudly holds up the official license he purchased to trade in the city. With his documents in order, he successfully manages to secure a prime location for his stall. A banner bearing the emblem of his craft billows proudly against the clear sky. Fake decides to start small by only displaying 2 of his best longswords on the counter. He sets the weapons down and announces the official beginning of his first business venture. The marketplace fills with the noise and energy of diverse traders and shoppers. Groups of townspeople wander through the rows of stalls, searching for interesting goods. A heavy silence falls over Fake's stall as time passes without a single customer stopping by. He laments his bad luck, frustrated that he hasn't attracted any interest at all. He looks on with envy as the stall directly opposite his remains constantly crowded with people. Dejected, Fake hangs his head as he begins to lose hope in his sales strategy. He wonders if other stalls look more attractive and if he failed to display his products effectively. Sighing, he realizes he will need to put much more effort into his presentation next time. Ali glares at the passing crowd, refusing to let his hard work go unnoticed. She takes a deep breath and prepares to take matters into her own hands. Suddenly, Ali shouts out to the crowd and asks if any adventurers are looking for high-quality longswords. Fake jolts in shock, staring at her in absolute disbelief after her loud exclamation. A passing knight stops in his tracks and points to himself in confusion. The adventurer gives a slow nod, having been successfully drawn in by her bold call. Ali asks the man what he thinks of the weapons they have on display. The man pauses to consider the offer while Ali watches him with anticipation. Fake watches the man walk away, feeling a wave of shame for his earlier lack of confidence. Ali apologizes with a blush, wondering if her presence is actually scaring off potential buyers. Fake quickly reassures her that he is truly happy just to be working by her side. Ali looks up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude behind her mask. He smiles back warmly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose despite the slow start. He vows to do his absolute best to ensure her efforts aren't wasted. Doubts creep in again as he worries that no one has come despite the high quality of his blades. He reminds himself that the first sale is always the hardest, even back when he was a village smith. Clenching his fist, he maintains confidence in his work and knows any target adventurer would be satisfied. A young girl's voice suddenly cuts through the air, calling out to get their attention. The girl stops at the counter and asks if they are truly selling longswords there. Both Fake and Ali stare at her in wide-eyed shock, stunned by the sudden interest. Fake eagerly confirms they are and invites the girl to hold one of the swords for herself. The girl picks up the blade and inspects it with a look of pure wonder. She gives the sword a quick swing, testing the balance and weight of the enchanted steel. Stopping her movements, she looks down at the weapon with an impressed expression. Fake asks if she is an adventurer, to which she enthusiastically confirms that she is. She reveals she is currently F rank but is working hard to reach E rank soon. The girl marvels at how light the sword feels, while Fake internally worries about her tight budget. He explains that the weapon's lightness is a result of the special enchantments he applied. The girl hesitates before shyly asking if he would be willing to sell it for only 10,000 gold. Fake's expression shatters into shock as he repeats the incredibly low price in disbelief. He internally screams that her offer is a massive lowball for such a high-quality item. He thinks to himself that it is foolish to negotiate with someone who reveals their small budget so easily. The girl looks up at him with teary, pleading eyes that are difficult to refuse. Fake winces at her expression, finding himself in a difficult position as a first-time seller. Raising his hand to stop her, he bluntly states that the longsword is actually priced at 50,000 gold. He admits to himself that the exorbitant price is actually a lie intended to set a high bar for his work. Even if he were to cut the price, he resolves not to go below 20,000 gold since his goal is building brand awareness. The young girl looks down dejectedly, acknowledging that the weapon is clearly of high quality. With a kind smile, Fake decides to let her purchase the blade for only 10,000 gold as a one-time special offer. The adventurer's eyes sparkle with excitement as he explains that there is a specific reason for this massive discount. He tells her that what his business truly needs right now is the ability to gain new customers through word of mouth. He asks her to recommend his stall to other adventurers, pointing out the flag he will fly every market day. Grinning widely, the girl promises to tell all of her friends about the incredible blacksmith. She carefully counts out the payment and drops the gold coins into his waiting hand. The young woman bows respectfully with her new weapon before heading off to join the crowd. Fake watches her go, content with the fact that he managed to turn a profit on his very first sale. He feels relieved that production costs aren't an issue yet since the Duke is providing all the materials. Alicia cheers for their success while Fake explains that selling even one blade was his ultimate goal for today. She tilts her head in confusion, wondering why he isn't more concerned about the 4 swords still on display. He explains that his plan was to sell at least one item to start building a reputation that will grow over time. Alicia smiles warmly, certain that people will flock to his stall once they see the quality of his work. Looking forward to the future, Fake vows to perform even better during the next market day. The evening sun casts a warm glow over the sprawling city as the busy market day comes to an end. He considers his first day a decent start, having earned 10,000 gold through his own honest effort. With a determined fist and a bright blush, he celebrates the fact that someone finally bought one of his creations. He smiles with pure joy, feeling the weight of his first earned gold and the hope for a better life. Approaching the grand doors of the estate, he prepares to report his successful results to Duke Gorrel. Duke Gorrel asks for a detailed report on how the young blacksmith fared during his first day in the city. Standing before the Duke's desk, Fake prepares to account for his performance with a serious expression. Fake reports that his total sales for the entire day amounted to exactly 1 longsword. He respectfully offers a portion of his earnings as thanks for the provided workshop and raw materials. Gorrel dismisses the payment and promises to keep providing witch iron as he always has. The Duke notes that Fake had to cut his prices significantly just to secure a single sale. Gorrel sternly declares that he cannot entrust his daughter to someone with such low profits. Fake vows to increase his sales while the Duke challenges him to prove his actual worth. With a determined shout, Fake swears he will succeed as Alicia's true fiancé. The Duke stares back with a serious and evaluating expression as he weighs the boy's resolve. Back at the manor, Fake realizes he needs to conduct market research to improve his earnings. Looking out at the night sky, he decides to investigate a new part of town tomorrow. Fake arrives at Adventurers Street to study the local weapon shops for reference. He notes a busy smithy that runs 2 different types of equipment shops at once. A pair of adventurers discuss their gear while testing the weight of a new sword. Observing the shoppers, Fake confirms that longswords are indeed the highest in demand. He considers decorating his sword handles since buyers prefer weapons that look more attractive. Noticing a need for utility and combat knives, he plans to expand his product line. Alicia calls out to Fake, announcing that they have finally reached the guild. The pair stands before the grand and bustling entrance of the Adventurers Guild. Alicia suggests that registering will help them research the specific weapon ranks in demand. Fake agrees to sign up, noting that guild work could provide extra money if needed. They scan the crowded board filled with party recruitment notices and monster requests. He peers into the rowdy cafeteria area that has essentially turned into a guild bar. Alicia giggles while Fake notes the distinct and familiar smell of the guild interior. Fake asks Alicia to wait for a moment while he goes to handle the registration. 2 thugs watch Alicia from the shadows, focusing on the hooded girl with ill intent. A wooden sign marks the counter where adventurers can submit their request orders. Another station is dedicated to adventurers looking to sell materials from their hunts. Fake locates the registration office and prepares to officially join the guild. He is pleased to find no queue, realizing the process won't take very long. The receptionist explains that he must provide his name and personal history to register. She asks him to register his magical power information to finalize the guild card. Fake focuses his energy as a soft glow emanates from his hand during the registration. The receptionist hands over the completed card and warns him about replacement fees. She offers a polite smile and wishes him the best of luck as a new adventurer. Fake hurries back toward Alicia, waving his hand and apologizing for the short wait. 2 men approach Alicia and rudely ask if she is an adventurer looking for work. One thug reaches out to grab her hood, warning her not to ignore his presence. They mockingly suggest she abandon her current plans to take on requests with them. The thugs boast about being C-rank adventurers who are more important than some commoner. A rough hand moves to block her way while trying to invite her out for a meal. Fake steps firmly between the thugs and Alicia, reminding them that he is her fiancé.